Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. The fifth National Climate Assessment is being released. The full report is not yet available, but the figures from it are. I downloaded them and took a quick look and can see they're going to provide me endless hours of entertainment. This graph immediately caught my attention. It purports to show that burn acreage in the United States has been increasing since 1985. So we might ask the question, why did they start their data in 1985? If we look at the complete National Interagency Fire Center data set going back to 1926, you can see why they hid the data before 1985. They want to create the impression that burn acreage is increasing when in fact it is decreasing. This year was the 12th lowest on record and the lowest of the current century. They're hiding the data before 1985 and after 2020 in order to create their fake graph. In 1945, the U.S. Forest Service put out this publication. Every year, an average of 31 million acres of forest land is burned over, an area larger than the state of New York. To put that in perspective, the average around 1945 was about 15 times larger than this year's burn area. The U.S. government put out this document in 2001. In the conterminous United States during the pre-industrial period, 1500 to 1800, an average of 145 million acres burned annually. Today, only 14 million acres are burned annually by a wildland fire. This year's burn acreage was only 2.5 million acres, so it's down 97% since carbon dioxide was at pre-industrial levels. There's been a huge decrease in burn acreage in what is now the United States over the last 500 years. This graph in the National Climate Assessment of burn acreage is completely fraudulent and is an obvious attempt to deceive the public. The high burn acreage of the past is very well documented. New York Times, October 9, 1938. Forest fires, one every 3 minutes in 1937, burned almost 22 million acres. That's almost 10 times as much as what burned this year. And the New York Times reported that burn acreage in 1936 was almost double that of 1937. But reality didn't stop PolitiFact or the National Climate Assessment for attempting to deceive the public about forest fires. People attempting to cover up the high burn acreage of the past have used this paragraph from the National Interagency Fire Center as their excuse to do so. It says, prior to 1983, sources of these figures are not known or cannot be confirmed and were not derived from the current situation reporting process. As a result, the figures prior to 1983 should not be compared to later data. The table they're referring to shows the number of fires and burn acreage per year going back to 1926. If we look at a graph of the number of fires, we can see what the problem is. There is a discontinuity at 1983. The number of fires counted prior to 1983 was larger than the number counted after that. It is common for multiple fires in the same region to merge. What is now counted as one fire may have been counted as 2 or 3 previously. It is clear that you cannot compare the number of fires prior to 1983 to the number of fires after 1983. If we look at the burn acreage data, though, there's no such discontinuity. Prior to 1983 and after 1983, the graph looks pretty much the same. There's no reason to believe there's any significant problem with the burn acreage data prior to 1983. In 1945, we built 2 types of atomic bombs. I'm pretty sure that people were smart enough to count acres of forest. CNN provided a pretty good hint of what these climate scamsters are up to. Jet-setting globalists are tired of traffic jams and long security lines at the airport. So they're using the climate scam as a way to restrict the travel of the peasantry. Meanwhile, thousands of private jets and 70,000 attendees are headed off to the climate conference at the United Arab Emirates. And you can be pretty certain they won't be eating insects like Klaus Schwab wants you to do. If this actually had something to do with reducing carbon emissions, they would have held this meeting via Zoom. not via private jet. Toto is going to have a lot of fun with all the fraud in the National Climate Assessment. You can visit him and his large family on the web at realclimatescience.com.